My husband thinks he can get away with faking a business trip while I'm left to bury my mother grieving alone while he's off playing his games. But what he doesn't know is I've already booked a flight to his destination, and this time he'll pay for his lies. The first crack in my world came subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a stone thrown in two. Still water sending ripples outward. My husband Mark had always been a good provider, charming in public, reliable in private. But something had begun to change between us. It wasn't something I could pinpoint at first, just a lingering feeling that he was drifting. Our conversations had become shorter, his attentions more focused on his phone than on me. Still, I wanted to believe it was a phase, a product of his busy career. It wasn't until the phone call came, the one that shattered my illusion, that I truly began to see the truth. I had been sitting in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of my mother's belongings, still reeling from the emotional weight of her sudden passing. The funeral had been a blur of faces and condolences, a series of motions I had gone through automatically, trying to hold myself together for the sake of others, but inside I was crumbling. She had been my rock, my guiding light. Now I was adrift in a sea of grief, struggling to keep afloat. Mark had been acting strangely distant in a way that I had brushed off his stress. He had told me just days before my mother passed that he would be away for a business trip. Something about a potential merger with a company in another city. It made sense, at least on the surface. He had worked late nights on this deal for months. But as I sat there sorting through my mother's old photo albums, the familiar sound of his voice on the phone echoed through the house. "I'll be home in a few days," he had said. His tone had been neutral, even slightly distant. "You be okay? I'll be fine," I had replied. Though the words felt hollow even to me just trying to get through this, he had reassured me, or at least I thought so, but I could sense a disconnect in his voice. A detachment that unnerved me. The days that followed only amplified my unease. I found myself unable to focus my thoughts, continually drifting to him, to his absence, to what he was really doing. While I sat alone with my grief, it wasn't until I happened upon his laptop that the truth began to unravel. I had gone into his office to look for a document I had misplaced, something he had promised to send me the day before, but as I opened his laptop, the screen flashed with a browser tab I hadn't seen before. It wasn't the usual work-related pages he frequented. Instead, it was a page displaying flight information, a one-way ticket to a city halfway across the country for a business meeting. I froze my fingers, gripping the edge of the desk as my heart began to race. The city he had told me he was visiting for work was nowhere near this new destination. I felt a sickening knot form in my stomach. Why had he lied? What was he hiding? My mind raced, imagining all the possibilities, none of them comforting. The betrayal felt like a slow creeping poison, one that I hadn't noticed until it was too late. But that wasn't enough. I needed more. I couldn't just sit with the discomfort of suspicion. I had to know the full truth. So over the next few days, I followed his trail. I checked his phone, his emails, anything that might give me a clearer picture. I didn't find anything overt. No obvious evidence of what I feared, but there were inconsistencies, odd little details that didn't quite add up. He had mentioned being busy with meetings, but I found receipts for a hotel stay in a different city. One he hadn't mentioned, small things, but they were enough to make my heart race with growing dread. It was on a Sunday evening, as I scrolled through his calendar app on his phone, that the truth hit me with the force of a tidal wave. He had scheduled his business trip right around the same time. I had made plans for the funeral, plans that included being with my mother's side of the family, the people who had always been there for me when I needed them most. He hadn't even offered to come with me, not even for a single moment, to show his support for the loss of my mother. My mind whirled. How could he do this? How could he act like everything was normal when I was facing such immense pain? The answer was simple. He didn't care. And the thought of that reality, of the man I had married, the man I had trusted, filling my life with lies and selfishness, was unbearable. As the anger built inside me, so did a plan. If he thought he could get away with this, if he thought I would sit idly by while he lived a double life, he was mistaken. I wasn't going to sit in the shadows of my own grief any longer. This was no longer about mourning my mother. It was about reclaiming control over my own life, over my own fate. I would go to him. I would confront him. But not as a broken woman. Not as the one who was left to clean up the mess he had made. I would do this on my terms. Spent the next few days preparing, pretending that everything was normal. I made phone calls, arranged my schedule, and quietly booked a flight to the city. He had lied about the same city he had claimed to be in. You wouldn't expect me to show up, not in a million years. But that was the point. He would think everything was fine, that his lies had slipped under my radar. And when I confronted him, when I stood in front of him with the truth, he would see exactly how far I was willing to go to expose his deceit. I packed a small bag, the only one I would need for the few days I planned to be away. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. My mind was set, and there was no turning back now. The grief that had once consumed me, that had weighed so heavily on my chest, was now overshadowed by a burning need for answers for justice. And when I stepped off that plane in the city that had once been his secret, I would be ready. I didn't know exactly what I would find when I reached him, but one thing was clear. Wasn't just going to let him get away with this. Not anymore. When the plane touched down in the city, I felt my heart race. The air was thick with the weight of everything I was about to confront. I was no longer the woman who had been left at home, lost in her grief. That person was gone, replaced by someone who was driven by the need for answers. Someone determined to hold her world together by whatever means necessary. I wasn't just chasing after a lie. I was running toward the truth, and nothing could stop me now. The hotel I checked into was quiet and unassuming, nestled on the outskirts of the city. It felt safe, like a quiet retreat from the storm. I was about to stir up. I left my bags in the room, not bothering to unpack. There was no need. I wasn't here for rest. I was here for something far more crucial: to understand why Mark had lied to me, why he had chosen to deceive me, while I struggled to hold on to the pieces of my life after my mother's passing. I spent the next few hours gathering information. The city felt foreign to me, like a place I had no claim to, and I wandered its streets collecting bits of the puzzle, wondering how it would all fit together. When the moment of reckoning arrived, his lies had cut deep, deeper than I cared to admit. And yet I knew there was something more beneath his actions, something I couldn't yet see but could feel in my bones. There was a story here, and I was going to uncover it. I found his hotel with ease. It was a high-rise in the business district, surrounded by glass and steel, an impressive monument to success. Mark had always been proud of his work, proud of his ability to climb the corporate ladder. I thought about all the years we had spent together, building a life, supporting each other, now standing outside this sleek hotel. It felt like I had been living in a world built on sand, everything slipping through my fingers. The anger that had simmered quietly inside me began to bubble to the surface, no longer manageable, but I had to stay calm. I couldn't let him see how much he had hurt me, not yet. I waited, I watched, and finally the moment came. Mark walked out of the hotel, phone pressed to his ear, his face set in a mask of concentration, but something was different about him, something I hadn't expected. He wasn't alone. A woman followed behind him, her laughter light almost. Carefree, the way they moved together, closer than necessary, their bodies aligning in a way that suggested intimacy, shared secrets. It made my stomach churn. I could feel the blood draining from my face as I stood there, frozen in place. This wasn't just a business trip. This was something else entirely, something I wasn't prepared for. He had been lying to me for months. But this was the ultimate betrayal. They reached a car waiting by the curb, and without thinking, I stepped into the street, following them at a distance. The woman slid into the car first, and Mark followed her, his hand brushing her arm in a gesture that made me feel like I was intruding on something sacred, a scene I never wanted to witness, but one I couldn't look away from. My heart was heavy in my chest, suffocating under the weight of the truth. I had been left behind, left to grieve alone. But he had not been alone. He had someone else. He had her. The anger inside me flared again, but this time, it wasn't just anger. It was betrayal, confusion, and a deep, sadness that I couldn't escape, My hands trembled as I watched the car pull away, leaving me standing there, exposed, raw, and vulnerable in a city that wasn't mine. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? I wanted to shout, to run to him and demand answers, but I knew that the moment I approached him, it would all be over. There would be no turning back. I waited until the car disappeared around a corner. Before I started walking, I didn't know where I was going. My mind was a blur. My thoughts tangled in a web of hurt and confusion. I needed to think to process everything I had just seen. But it was impossible to focus the image of him with her. Their connection, so casual, so easy, played over and over in my mind. It felt like a nightmare, something that couldn't be real. But I knew it was. I had seen it with my own eyes. I found myself at a cafe, sitting by the window, staring at nothing. I had to pull myself together. I couldn't let him see how much this hurt. I couldn't let him know that I was cry crumbling. If I did, he would win. He had to pay for what he had done. This wasn't just about my mother's passing, it was about the trust he had shattered, the promises he had broken. I had been left in the dark, and now the truth had been thrust into the light, whether I was ready or not. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I hesitated before answering. "Who is Mark K?" "I'm just finishing up a call, I'll be back soon," he said, his voice casual, like everything was normal. Like nothing had changed, but everything had changed, everything. "I'll be here when you get back," I replied. My voice steady though, my heart was pounding in my chest. I had no intention of returning to the hotel. Not yet. Not until I had all the answers. But I needed him to believe that everything was fine. That nothing had happened. I couldn't show him my hand yet. He still had no idea that I knew the truth. I hung up, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. The storm inside me was still raging, but now it was under control. I had a plan. I would confront him, but not in the way he expected. I would make him think that I was just another victim of his lies. But when the time came, I would make him see exactly how much pain he had caused, and in that moment I would reclaim my life. I wouldn't let him win. The hours passed slowly, the weight of the situation pressing down on me, but I held on. I couldn't let him see how broken I was. Not yet. The next morning, I stood outside Mark's hotel, watching the sun rise over the city, feeling a strange mixture of resolve and unease. I had spent the night wrestling with my thoughts, my mind spinning in circles. But now, as I stood in the soft light of the early morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't wait any longer. The truth had already revealed itself in ways I had never imagined. But I wasn't finished yet. I still had to face him, to ask the questions that had been haunting me for days. Questions that had torn at my heart and soul. I made my way into the hotel lobby, keeping my head down, walking with the sort of quiet confidence that only comes when you're prepared for a storm. The receptionist barely looked up as I passed her. The soft hum of the elevator in the background, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside me. I knew that when I stepped into his suite, I would be walking into a confrontation that would change everything. There was no going back from this. No way to unhear the things I would say. No way to erase the hurt that would follow. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding, and I stepped out the hallway, stretching ahead of me. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I had already planned this. He was planned. Going to be in his room, and I was going to get the answers I deserved, whether he was ready to give them or not. I reached his door and paused for a moment, the sound of his voice muffled. Through the wood drifted toward me. He was speaking to someone, but I couldn't make out the words. It didn't matter. I had heard enough of his voice over the last few days to know that nothing he said would change what I had already discovered. Taking a deep breath, I knocked sharply on the door. A moment passed before I heard his footsteps. When the door opened, he was standing there, a look of surprise flickering in his eyes, quickly masked by his usual confident smile. "Hey, what are you doing here?" he asked. His tone light, though I could see the tension in his posture. The way his eyes darted behind me for a split second, as if checking for something or someone he didn't want me to see. I came for answers. I said, my voice steady, but with an edge to it that I couldn't hide. Mark's smile faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered answers. What do you mean I told you I'd be back in a few days, and I'm just finishing up with some work? Nothing to worry about. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The room was exactly as I expected, sterile too, clean, too perfect. But there was something off about it. Something about the way everything was arranged, as though he were trying too hard to create an illusion of normalcy. I turned to face him, crossing my arms. You're a liar, Mark. I saw you with her last night. Don't deny it. His face went pale for a moment. I thought I saw a flicker of genuine emotion. Panic, guilt, maybe fear. But it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual calm demeanor. That's not what you think, he said, taking a step toward me, his voice more insistent now. It's business and I business. You're trying to tell me that was business. My voice was rising now, but I couldn't stop it. The betrayal burned like fire in my chest, making it hard to breathe. You've been lying to me, Mark. You lied about the trip. You lied about who you're with, and now you're standing here trying to make excuses. I was shaking, but not from fear. No, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was furious at him, at the lies, at how he had made me feel so small, so insignificant. The truth was now a blade cutting through every illusion I had built up around our relationship, and yet, despite everything, part of me still wanted to hear him deny it, to hear him tell me it wasn't true, to make everything okay again. But I knew better than to hope for that. Who is she? I asked, my voice lower now, steady but filled with a quiet rage. What is she to you, Mark? His eyes flickered, and for a brief moment I saw something I hadn't expected, regret. But then, like a wall going up, his expression hardened. You don't understand, he said, his voice edged with frustration. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me, Mark, I shouted. My patience evaporating, explain why I was left alone to bury my mother while you played these games, explain why you've been deceiving me for so long. I could see the shift in him. Then he took a step back. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I knew he was trying to figure out how to control the situation, to deflect, to smooth things over, but I wasn't going to let him, not this time. I wasn't some night wife who would forgive him with a few well-placed words. Look, I'm sorry about your mom, he said, his voice finally softening, but I could hear the edge to it now, the forced calmness. But this is complicated. I never meant for things to get this far. Complicated, I laughed bitterly. You think I'm going to buy that? You've been lying to me, Mark. You've been living a double life, and I've been the fool. But I'm not going to be that fool anymore. There was a long silence between us, the weight of my words hanging in the air like smoke. I could feel the tension between us thickening. The truth was undeniable. Now he couldn't take it back, and for a moment I thought he might confess, might finally show me some kind of vulnerability. But instead he straightened, a coldness returning to his eyes. This is over, he said, his voice steady, but the finality in it made my chest tighten. I can't keep doing this. I was stunned not by his words, but by the complete lack of remorse in his tone. He wasn't sorry, not really. He wasn't sorry for what he had done, not for the way he had treated me, not for the life he had been living behind my back. In that moment, I realized something that hurt more than anything he could have said. I wasn't even part of the equation anymore. I was just an obstacle in his path for the first time in our relationship. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing, just an empty void, a space that was once filled with love. Now hollow and cold. Goodbye, Mark, I said quietly, my voice firm as I turned to leave. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision, and now for the first time in a long time, I was free. Walking away from Mark's hotel, the reality of everything that had just happened slowly started to sink in. The silence between us had been deafening, a testament to the finality of it all. I felt oddly calm, as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but deep inside the anger still simmered, a slow burn that wouldn't be quenched until I had resolved what I had come here to do. I needed answers, not just from Mark, but from myself. I had been so consumed by the betrayal that I hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. Why had he lied? Why had he put us in this position in the first place? There had to be more to it. More than just a secret affair or a business trip gone aria. Mark wasn't the type to be careless to make such a glaring mistake. No, there was something beneath the surface that I hadn't seen yet. I walked the streets aimlessly for a while, trying to clear my mind. The city felt like a blur, too bright, too noisy, a stark contrast to the quiet storm that raged inside me. I could hear my mother's voice in the back of my mind reminding me that I was stronger than this, that I had always been capable of facing adversity head-on. But how could I face this? How could I confront the man I had spent years of my life with, the one who had promised me everything and then lied without a second thought? As the day wore on, the answer became clear. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just walk away and pretend everything was fine. Mark needed to face the consequences of his actions. He had taken something precious from me, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it. I went back to my hotel. My mind made up. It was time to make my move. The hotel room was still as quiet as I left it. The curtains drawn, the light from outside spilling in weakly. I sat at the small desk, pulling out my laptop. The words on the screen blurred as I tried to focus. But my mind was far from the task at hand. I had to do something, anything, to regain control of the situation. I couldn't let this lie stand. My eyes flicked to my phone, the screen, lighting up with a text message from Mark. "Can we talk later? I think we need to work through this." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a surge of anger that was quickly followed by a sense of clarity. He thought he could fix it. He thought he could smooth things over with a few words and make everything go back to the way it was. But I wasn't some naive woman waiting for him to come back and apologize. I had already made my decision, and there would be no turning back from it. I started typing a response. I couldn't just text him and let him think he had the upper hand. I had to make him see that this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore, so I took a deep breath and typed, "You're right, we do need to talk, but not in the way you think. Meet me tonight at 8 at the restaurant on 3rd Street. I'll be waiting." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. This was it. This was my chance to confront him fully, to make him understand just how deep his betrayal ran. The rest of the day was a blur. As I prepared for the evening, I didn't know what would happen when I saw him again, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let him get away with anything. I was done being the victim. I was done letting him think that his lies didn't matter. I was going to make him see the truth, his truth, and I would do whatever it took to make him pay for what he had done. At 7:30, I left my room and headed to the restaurant. It was a small, intimate place, the kind of place Mark and I used to frequent when we wanted to escape the noise of our everyday lives. It felt fitting that I would be here now, standing at the threshold of the most important conversation of my life. This wasn't just about Mark anymore. It was about me, about reclaiming my strength, about taking back control of my story. I arrived at the restaurant early, the table set with white linen, the dim lighting giving the place a warm, welcoming glow. But none of that mattered. I was here for one reason only: to make Mark face the consequences of his actions. He walked in just before 8, looking every bit the man who thought he was in control. His eyes scanned the room before landing on me, a hesitant smile forming on his lips. But when he saw my face, the smile faltered, replaced by something closer to weariness. "Good. You should be afraid he should know that this wasn't going to go the way he expected." "Hey," he said softly, sliding into the chair across from me. "You wanted to talk." I nodded, my gaze unwavering. "Yes, I do." There was a long pause. I could see him trying to figure out what was happening, trying to read me, but he didn't know. He didn't know what I was capable of. "Now you've been lying to me, Mark," I said, my voice low but steady. "You've been living a double life, and I can't pretend anymore that I don't know. I saw you with her, I saw you both together, and I won't sit here and act like it's nothing." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing him. No more excuses, no more lies. "I'm done." Being the fool, I could see the panic begin to rise in his eyes, the familiar defensive mask slipping, but it was too late for him to salvage this. I wasn't the woman who would forgive him with a few smooth words anymore. I wasn't the woman who would look the other way and pretend everything was okay. "I know you think this is about her," I continued, my voice growing colder. "But it's not. This is about the lies you told me. This is about the trust you broke. And that's something you can never get back." Mark shifted in his seat, his hands fidgeting nervously, but he didn't say anything. It was clear he didn't have an answer for me, not one that would make this right. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I know what you've been hiding, Mark, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. His face paled, the realization sinking in. And this wasn't just a confrontation. This was the beginning of his downfall. I'm not asking for an apology, I said, standing up from the table. I'm taking control now, and I'm going to make sure that no one ever forgets how you treated me with that. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't over yet, but I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and nothing was going to stop me now. As I walked out of the restaurant, my heart still pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside me. This wasn't just about Mark anymore. It was about who I was becoming, who I had to become, in order to move on from this mess. The anger had started to feel more like a tool, a means to an end rather than an all-consuming force. But as I reached the street, the bitter sting of betrayal was still sharp, and I couldn't deny that a part of me wanted nothing more than to confront Mark again, to push him to the edge and make him face what he had done. I wanted to see the regret in his eyes, to hear the desperation in his voice as he pleaded for forgiveness, but I knew better. I had to be smart. I couldn't let my emotions control me now. Not when I was this close to getting what I wanted. I pulled my phone out of my purse and checked the time. It was nearly midnight. Mark hadn't contacted me after I left the restaurant. I didn't expect him to. I knew he would be trying to figure out what to do next. He'd probably reach out tomorrow when the dust had settled, but I didn't want to wait. I wasn't going to give him that luxury. I made my way back to my hotel, my mind racing with 1,000 different thoughts. Was it really over? Could I just walk away and leave him to deal with the mess he'd created? Or did I have to do something more, something bigger? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't stop now. I had started something and I had to see it through. When I entered my room, I locked the door behind me and sat down at the desk. The quiet of the room felt suffocating. My fingers hovered over the keys of my laptop, unsure of where to start. The situation had escalated so quickly, but now I was in control. This was my story, and I had the power to shape how it ended. I needed more information, something that would give me the leverage I needed to make Mark's life a living hell. There had to be something he was hiding, some piece of the puzzle that he hadn't accounted for. I thought back to what I had overheard in the parking lot earlier. Mark's words had stuck with me, the way he had mentioned someone named Olivia. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it, but now it felt like a key piece of the puzzle. I had to find out who she was, what role she played in this web of lies. I fired up my laptop and began searching, diving deep into his professional life. I knew Mark well, better than anyone. I knew his routines, his colleagues, the places he frequented. I could feel the frustration rising as I scrolled through countless pages of company emails, project reports, and corporate memos. None of it was useful. None of it led me to the answers I was desperately searching for. Then sudden thought struck me. What if the key to understanding Mark's behavior wasn't in his work life? What if it was in his personal life, something more hidden? Something he had worked hard to keep buried. I recalled the conversations I'd overheard about Olivia, about the private trips Mark had taken to places I never knew about. Maybe there was more to those trips than he had let on. With newfound determination, I focused on Mark's personal accounts after some digging. I found an old email account that seemed disconnected from his work, an account he must have forgotten about. There, buried among the dozens of old emails, was a thread between him and someone named Olivia. The emails were casual at first, filled with mundane exchanges about business, but soon they turned more personal. They spoke about weekend getaways, private dinners, and subtle hints at something more. The tone shifted over time from friendly banter to something more intimate. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This wasn't just an innocent friendship. These emails told a story of something deeper, something darker. I scrolled through page after page, reading every word, piecing together the puzzle as the emails became more personal. One email stood out. It was sent just a week before Mark's business trip. I can't wait to see you again. You know how much I love our time together. Let up, make this weekend. Unforgettable. My fingers trembled as I read those words. This wasn't just a business relationship. This was an affair. I had suspected it for so long. But now I had the evidence. Mark had been hiding it all along, and I had finally uncovered the truth. But there was still one thing that didn't make sense. Why had he been so careful to keep this relationship under wraps? What was he trying to protect? The answer came to me suddenly. Olivia wasn't just a woman. Mark was seeing on the side. She was someone important, someone with power. I dug deeper, tracing the emails back to her identity. Olivia Harris. The name was familiar, but I couldn't place it at first then. It hit me. She was the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the city. If Mark had been involved with her, it could explain everything. His secretive trips, his sudden absences, his increasingly erratic behavior. But why had he kept this from me? The more I thought about it, the more the pieces started to fit. Olivia wasn't just an affair. She was the key to understanding everything. Mark had been playing a dangerous game, using me as his cover, while pursuing a woman who could elevate his career to unimaginable heights. He wasn't just lying to me. He was lying to everyone, using me as a pawn in a much bigger scheme. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the revelation settling over me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposing the truth, showing the world who Mark really was. I had to make sure everyone knew what kind of man he truly was. Someone willing to destroy everything for personal gain. I sat there for what felt like hours, turning over every detail, every moment, every lie. The truth was GL, but it was powerful, and I wasn't going to let Mark get away with it. I had uncovered the secret that he had fought so hard to keep hidden, and now it was my turn to turn the tables. The next step was clear. I had the evidence, and I knew exactly what I had to do. It was time to make Mark pay for the life he had stolen from me. The life he had destroyed, but this time, I wouldn't be the one left holding the pieces. This time, it would be him. It had been 3 days since I uncovered the truth about Mark, and I couldn't stop the rush of emotions that swept through me. Betrayal, anger, disbelief, each one tangled together, forming an overwhelming tide that pulled me under. But now, as the hours passed, something inside me was shifting. I was no longer that woman who had been left in the dark, the one who had been deceived at every turn. I was becoming someone else, someone sharper, more calculating. I hadn't spoken to Mark since the night I left the restaurant. Part of me had considered confronting him immediately, but I knew I needed to control the situation. If I rushed in blinded by emotion, I would lose the advantage. Mark thought he was the one holding the cards. It was time to turn the tables. The first step was simple. I had to meet him, not just to confront him, but to expose him, to make him face the full weight of his lies, and watch as everything he'd carefully built crumbled around him, and the perfect opportunity came. When I received a text from him, "I know you're angry, but we need to talk. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for things to go this far. Can we meet tomorrow?" It was almost laughable how easy it was to manipulate him. He wanted to fix things, to pretend everything could go back to the way it was, but I knew there was no going back. There was only one way forward, and it was through exposing him for the fraud he was. I agreed to meet him, but I wasn't going to let him control the narrative. I chose a neutral location, a quiet cafe one, where he wouldn't expect anything unusual, a place he could feel safe. I knew he would come thinking he could talk his way out of it, thinking he could convince me that his actions had all been justified, but I was ready the next afternoon. I sat at a corner table, my fingers tapping nervously against the edge of my coffee cup. The warm aroma of the coffee shop filled the air, but it did little to calm my nerves. My heart pounded as the minutes ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. I had planned for this, rehearsed the confrontation in my mind over and over, but nothing could prepare me for seeing him again. When the door opened and I saw Mark walk in, I froze. His usual confident stride was absent. Instead, he seemed hesitant, almost cautious. His eyes immediately scanned the room, and when they landed on me, I saw the brief flash of guilt. He was trying to hide it, but it was there, in the way he shifted on his feet, in the tightness of his jaw. He approached the table, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other, too. People who once shared everything, now reduced to nothing more than strangers. Tied by betrayal finally, he broke the silence. I know I've made a mess of things. Mark said, his voice low, but you have to understand, it wasn't what you think. I raised a hand to stop him. There was no point in letting him spin his lies anymore. I had heard enough. No, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. I've heard all your excuses, Mark. I've seen the emails. I know everything. You can't talk your way out of this. Mark's face paled as I said the words. I could see the realization dawning on him, the fear, the panic. He hadn't expected this. He thought he could smooth things over with a few words, but I wasn't falling for it. You don't get to do that anymore. I continued, leaning forward slightly. You don't get to lie, to manipulate, to use me as a pawn in your games. You've been playing this whole time, haven't you, Mark? It wasn't just about Olivia. It was about everything, your career, your ego, and you thought you could just drag me along like I was nothing. Well, I'm done. His expression shifted again, this time to something darker. The anger that had been brewing beneath his surface finally broke through. He stood up, suddenly his chair scraping harshly against the floor. I remained seated, unflinching. You have no idea what you're talking about, he snapped. You think you've uncovered some big secret, but you just don't. I interrupted, my voice calm. But resolute, don't try to turn this around on me. I know exactly who you are now, and I know what you've been doing. Mark's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment I thought he might lose control, but he didn't. Instead, he took a deep breath and sat back down. The fury in his eyes remained, but now there was something else, something more calculating. You think you can just ruin my life because of a little mistake? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You're making a huge mistake. This isn't just about us, about what happened between us. If you go public with this, if you make any of this known, you'll regret it. A chill ran through me at his words. There was a threat hidden beneath the surface, a darkness I hadn't anticipated, but I wasn't afraid. I had no intention of backing down. Now the game had changed. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about power. I don't think you understand, Mark, I said slowly. You're already exposed, it's already done. All I have to do is press send and everything you've worked for will be gone. Your career, your reputation, all of it will come crashing down. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he might try to take control again, but this time I wasn't giving it up. I held the cards now, and he knew it. The tables had turned. Who do you think you are? He spat, the anger rising again. You're not some saint. You think you're better than me. This isn't about you, it's about me. You're just another person who got in my way. Just like all the others. I didn't flinch. No, Mark, this is about you, and now I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. I'm going to make sure they see the real you. I stood up, my hands trembling slightly, but my resolve stronger than ever. This is your last chance. Walk away, and we both move on. Or you can keep pushing, and I'll make sure the world knows the truth. It's your choice. Mark's gaze stayed fixed on mine. For a long moment, the tension hanging thick in the air. Finally, he exhaled, as if resigned to his fate. I'll walk away, he muttered, his voice barely audible. But don't think this is over. I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked away, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. With every step, the battle wasn't over. But for the first time, I felt like I was finally in control. As I walked out of the cafe, the cool evening air brushed against my skin, grounding me in the reality of the moment. Mark's words echoed in my mind, but I pushed them aside. He wasn't in control anymore. I had won the battle. But something gnawed at me, something deeper than the satisfaction of seeing him crumble. The truth had come out, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into unknown territory. The city felt different now as I made my way back to my apartment. The familiar streets seemed unfamiliar, as if I was seeing everything for the first time. There was a weight in the air, a quiet tension that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just Mark I had to deal with anymore. It was the ripple effect, the consequences of exposing him for the fraud he was. I couldn't deny it. What I had done wasn't without its price, as much as I hated Mark. As much as I wanted him to face the full weight of his actions. I knew there would be others who would be caught in the fallout. I had already begun to feel the pressure mounting, the sudden withdrawal of a few of my own professional contacts. The whispers that seemed to follow me wherever I went. It was inevitable, wasn't it? People didn't like to face the truth when it was uncomfortable, especially when the truth threatened to expose them as well. I couldn't go back, though. I had made my choice. Mark had underestimated me, thinking that I would cower, thinking that I would beg for forgiveness, but that wasn't who I was anymore. I had become someone different in this journey, someone stronger that evening. I sat alone in my apartment, staring out the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance, casting an almost peaceful glow over everything, yet I could feel the storm brewing within me. Mark had walked away from our meeting, but I knew he wouldn't stay quiet for long. The wheels in his mind were already turning, plotting his next move. The question was, would he take it further? Would he go down with everything? Or would he try to redeem himself by dragging me down with him? It wasn't just about Mark anymore. It was about everything he represented, the world of ambition and power, where people like him thought they could trample on anyone in their way. But I had seen through his carefully constructed facade, and now there was no going back. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and saw a name I hadn't expected, Olivia. My heart skipped a beat. She had been a shadow in my investigation, a ghost in the background, but she was now very much a part of the story. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Olivia. Her voice was calm, almost too calm when she spoke. I know you're angry, but we need to talk, I said, the edge of disbelief creeping into my tone. After everything now. You want to talk? She didn't seem fazed by my response. It's not what you think. I'm not calling to defend Mark or his actions. I'm calling because I think you need to understand the bigger picture. I felt a flicker of curiosity. Despite myself. What bigger picture? There's nothing you can say that will change. What I know. Olivia paused for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost pleading. You're making a mistake. If you think Mark is the only one at fault here, you have no idea what's really going on, do you? Her words hung in the air, a challenge I hadn't been expecting. There was a new urgency in her tone, something that made me pause. What are you talking about? There was a long silence before she spoke again, her voice now a whisper, as if she was afraid someone might overhear. Mark is just a pawn in all of this. You think he's the one who's been pulling the strings, but you're wrong. He's been manipulated too, and now, so have you. I leaned forward, a chill running down my spine. What do you mean? Are you saying he didn't know what he was doing? Olivia's laugh was bitter, tinged with something darker. No, he knew exactly what he was doing, but he didn't have a choice. None of you. As did you're not the only one who's been played. You know Mark may be the face of this, but there's a much bigger game at play. The words hung in the air, each one heavier than the last. I could feel the tension building in my chest as I tried to make sense of what she was saying. You're telling me that Mark wasn't the mastermind? Who else is involved? There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, I could hear the weight of her next words. I can't tell you everything right now, but I can tell you this. You need to be careful. There's more at stake here than you realize. Mark was never meant to be the one in control. He was just the distraction. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The ground beneath my feet felt unstable, as though the foundation of everything I thought I knew was crumbling. What do you want from me, Olivia? Why are you telling me all this? I'm telling you because I think you have a right to know the truth, she said. Her voice now filled with a mix of regret and determination. But you need to understand something. You can't expose Mark without exposing yourself too. You're tangled up in this. Whether you want to be or not, my pulse quickened. What are you saying? Are you threatening me? No. She replied almost softly. I'm warning you, you're playing with fire. And if you aren't careful, you might get burned. The line on when dead. Before I could respond, I stared at the phone in my hand, my thoughts racing. Olivia's words had hit me like a punch to the gut. Mark wasn't the mastermind, and neither was she. Someone else, someone more powerful, more dangerous, was pulling the strings. I was in the middle of something much bigger than I had ever imagined. The truth wasn't just about exposing Mark anymore. It was about survival. Five was right. If I was caught in the web of a far-reaching game, then the stakes had just changed. I had to dig deeper. I had to find out who was really behind this before it was too late. But with every new revelation, I could feel the walls closing in around me. No matter how much I uncovered, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led down a path I wasn't ready for, one that could change everything. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest, and the weight of Olivia's words settled heavily on my shoulders. The truth, or at least the truth I thought I knew, had shifted beneath my feet. Mark wasn't the mastermind, but that left a dangerous void, who was as the silence in my apartment grew louder. The only thing I could hear was the frantic beat of my own pulse. The next morning felt surreal, like the world had shifted slightly off its axis, and I was caught in its disorienting spin. I had no idea who to trust anymore. No idea where this path would lead me. I could feel the shadows of unseen forces creeping closer, and they weren't going to let me go easily. I didn't expect to hear from Mark. Not yet. He had a knack for disappearing when the heat was on. But I hadn't expected Olivia to call me again either. She'd left a message this time. Simply meet me at the old warehouse on 1st and Main. Come alone. The urgency in her voice was enough to make my pulse. Spike, the warehouse, was one of the last places I wanted to be, but I had no choice. If she truly had information that could help me understand the full scope of this mess, I had to hear it. But at the back of my mind, I knew this meeting could be a trap. I made my way there in the dead of night, the streets eerily quiet as I walked, my shoes clicking on the pavement like a ticking clock. The old warehouse loomed in front of me, its steel beams rusted and forgotten. By time a cold wind swept through the alleyways, sending a shiver down my spine. I hesitated at the door, a bead of sweat trailing down my temple. Despite the chill in the air, there was something unsettling about this place. Something that made me feel like I was walking into a storm. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by a few flickering lights. Shadows danced on the walls, and the faint smell of mildew filled the air. Olivia was already there, standing in the center of the room, her face obscured in the shadows. "Olivia," I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the oppressive silence. She stepped forward, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a fear or hesitation. "You came," she said softly. Her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't think you would. I thought you would run just like everyone else does when they realize what's really going on." I crossed my arms, studying her carefully. "You said you had information. What's going on?" "Olivia, what aren't you telling me?" She looked down, as if gathering the courage to speak. "I never wanted you involved in all this. I didn't know it would go this far. I thought I could contain it, but now I can't stop it. They've already started to cover their tracks, and they'll do whatever it takes to keep things buried." "Who are they?" I demanded. "Who's pulling the strings?" "Mark wasn't the mastermind. He's just the front, isn't he?" Olivia's face grew darker. "Yes, but you don't understand. Mark was always just a pawn in their game. The real players are much more dangerous. And now that you've exposed him, you've put yourself in their crosshairs." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "So what, you think I'm in danger now?" She nodded slowly. "They don't care about right or wrong. They care about power, about control. You've seen the kind of people Mark associates with. Do you really think they'll let you walk away from this without consequences?" I shook my head, frustration bubbling to the surface. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to expose the truth. I wanted to make him pay for what he did to me, to all of us. And now I'm being dragged into some kind of shadow where I don't even understand. Olivia's expression softened for a brief moment, but then her face hardened again, the resolve settling back in. "You're in this now. Whether you want to be or not, you can't turn back. But you have a choice. There's still a way out if you're willing to make it." I felt a surge of hope, a way out. "How?" "Tell me." She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's one person who has the power to stop all of this. One person who can expose the truth and shut down everything that's happening, but it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to come without a price." "Who is it?" I asked, desperation creep doing into my voice. "Tell me, Olivia, please." Her eyes flickered with doubt. "His name is Carter North. He's the one who controls everything. Mark the Shady deals everything. He's been behind it all from the start. But he's not just some businessman. He's untouchable. He knows every secret, every deal. If you want to bring everything down, you'll need to get to him, but he won't let you do that without a fight, Carter." North, the name sent a shiver down my spine. I had heard whispers about him before, but nothing concrete. Just rumors of a man so powerful, so well connected, that he could make entire companies disappear with a snap of his fingers. And now I was supposed to confront him, to expose him, the weight of the decision pressed down on me. What choice did I have? I had started this journey by wanting to bring Mark down. But now I realized it was about more than just him. It was about a system of corruption, a network of deceit that went deeper than I could ever have imagined. You're saying I'd have to take him down, I asked, my voice hoarse. Olivia nodded yes, but it won't be easy, and it will cost you more than you think. If you want to stop them, you'll have to play their game. You'll have to get inside their world and learn how they operate. But once you do, there's no turning back. I stood there, caught between the looming danger of confronting Carter North and the knowledge that if I didn't act, I would never be free of the web that had trapped me. The choice felt impossible, but I couldn't back down now, not after everything I had already sacrificed. I'll do it, I said, the words slipping from my mouth before I could fully understand their meaning. I'll find a way to bring him down no matter what it takes. Olivia's eyes studied me, and for the first time I saw a hint of something like respect in them. Then you better be ready, because this will change everything. And with those words, the storm that had been brewing for so long finally broke. I wasn't just playing with fire anymore. I was walking right into the heart of it as the tension built. I could feel my hands trembling. The flight had been long, but my mind was racing. Every moment felt like 1,000 years. It was a strange feeling. This was the moment when I had to face him, the man I had once trusted completely. How had I ended up here? I could almost hear his voice echoing in my mind, telling me how much he loved me, how he could never hurt me. But the lies had been too much. It wasn't just the business trip. It wasn't just the time away when I needed him most. Was everything. The little things I noticed disappearing for hours, strange phone calls, messages I wasn't supposed to see. He had thought I was too naive to understand, too lost in my own grief, to notice the cracks forming in our marriage, but now standing on the precious of everything I saw. It clearly, the betrayal, the manipulation, the games he played. The city below me looked peaceful from the airplane window, but I knew better. There was nothing peaceful about what was coming. I had no idea what I was walking into. But that was the point. I was no longer in the dark, no longer in the position of vulnerability he had conditioned me to be in. I had learned too much stepping off the plane. I was engulfed by the heat of the city. It was hot, sticky, the kind of climate that made everything feel heavy, like the air itself was conspiring against you. But I walked with purpose. I wasn't lost anymore. The destination he had so carefully crafted was now my playground, and I wasn't going to let him win. I had found the hotel where he was supposed to be staying. Of course, I had made sure to check every detail. His flight, the schedule, the details of the meetings, everything. It all LED here. He thought he was playing the game, but I was no longer the pawn this time. I was the one making the moves. When I reached the hotel, I couldn't help but smile to myself. He wouldn't see me coming. I was going to make him regret everything. As I walked up to the front desk, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My heart was pounding, and yet there was a strange calmness in my thoughts. It was like everything had led me here to this single moment. "Excuse me, I'm looking for my husband," I said, using the name I once held dear. The receptionist looked at me, momentarily confused, before nodding. "Room 508, she said. I didn't even thank her. I just turned my eyes fixed on the elevator room. 508, a small number, but it carried so much weight. The doors opened, and as I stepped inside, I could feel my heart beat in my throat. What was I going to say when I saw him? What was I going to do? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. He had to face the consequences. The elevator dinged, the door opened. There was room 58. I knocked, the sound of my knuckles against the wood echoing through the silence. There was a pause, a shift. Then the door cracked open slightly, and I saw his face, the same face I had trusted. Love built a life with his eyes widened for a fraction of a second, just enough for me to notice. But he quickly masked it with a forced smile. "What are you doing here?" His voice was calm. Too calm, almost like he had expected me. I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at him, taking in the way he seemed almost too composed, too relaxed, as though he had been prepared for this moment for me to finally uncover the truth. But how much of the truth I needed him to reveal everything to break. And in that instant I realized I didn't need to speak a word. My presence here was the truth he feared most. "What's going on, Jack?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. But it held weight. He hesitated. "It's not what you think." "I know," I interrupted, stepping closer. "Don't even try that. I know exactly what's been going on. I know about the meetings, the lies, the other people you've been involved with. Don't try to play this off. Like it's nothing." His eyes shifted. Something broke in them, the Knef mask he had worn for so long cracked. "You don't understand," he said, his voice faltering. "For the first time I understand more than you think," I said. My voice steady now, each word carrying more weight than I had ever imagined possible. "You thought you could get away with everything. Thought I was just going to sit back and let it all slide." He stepped back, his face pale now, but I wasn't done. I wasn't just here to confront him. I was here to take back my life, to demand the closure I had been denied for so long. "You think you've won, Jack, but you haven't," I said, my voice colder now. Every ounce of fury and pain I had been holding. In coming to the surface, this game ends now. There was a long silence. The air between us thickened, and then with a slow, deliberate movement, I turned and walked away. I didn't need to hear his excuses, his lies. I had already won in more ways than one. As I walked back down the hall, my phone buzzed, a text message from a friend. One who had known my struggle. "You're free now," it read. And that's when I realized for the first time in a long while, I was no longer bound by the chains of lies. I was free. The truth had set me free.